My neighbor called the city on me 17 times. He ended up regretting it. I moved into my dream house 2 years ago. It wasn't huge, it wasn't fancy, but it had one thing I'd always wanted: a large backyard workshop. I'm a carpenter, and after years of working out of cramped garages and rented spaces, I finally had a place where I could build furniture for my small business. The first few months were perfect. Then my neighbor moved in. We'll call him Greg. The first red flag appeared on moving day. Before the movers had even finished unloading, Greg walked across the property line and said, "Just so you know, I like things quiet around here." I laughed. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. A week later he knocked on my door. Apparently the sound of my power drill at 11 a.m. was disturbing the neighborhood. I apologized and explained I ran a woodworking business. He rolled his eyes and walked away. Things only got worse from there. A month later I received a notice from the city. Someone had reported an illegal commercial operation at my property. An inspector arrived. He looked around for 10 minutes. Everything was perfectly legal. Case closed. 2 weeks later another complaint appeared. This time it was excessive noise. Again, the city investigated. Again, no violation. Then came complaints about parking, storage, property appearance, outdoor lighting, building permits, drainage, animals. The list went on and on. After the 10th complaint, one inspector actually laughed. "Your neighbor again?" Apparently Greg had become well known around city offices. Over the next year he filed 17 complaints. 17. Every single one failed, but each investigation cost me time and stress. Then Greg escalated things. One Saturday morning I walked outside and discovered several expensive lumber boards ruined. Someone had poured bleach all over them. Nearly $2,000 worth of hardwood was destroyed. I was furious, but I couldn't prove who did it. A week later, it happened again. This time I checked my security cameras. And there he was, Greg, walking into my yard at 2:14 a.m. carrying a jug. The footage clearly showed him damaging the wood. I immediately contacted the police. When officers visited him, Greg claimed it was a misunderstanding. Then they watched the video. His face turned white. He ended up paying for the damaged materials. I thought that would be the end of it. Instead, he became even angrier. He started staring into my yard whenever I worked. He'd stand at the fence with binoculars. Actual binoculars. At one point he installed floodlights aimed directly at my workshop. Every night my property looked like a football stadium. I reported it. Nothing happened. Then fate intervened. One evening a survey crew appeared next door. At first I didn't think much of it. Then I noticed them placing markers everywhere. The next morning one of the surveyors knocked on my door. "Did you know your neighbor's new fence is on your property?" I nearly laughed. Greg had built a beautiful 6-foot privacy fence a few months earlier. He bragged about it constantly. Turns out nearly 30 feet of it crossed onto my land. The surveyor handed me the measurements. The fence wasn't inches over. It was almost 4 feet over in some places. I hired my own survey company. Same result. Greg's fence sat entirely on the wrong side of the property line. I politely informed him. He exploded. He insisted the land belonged to him. He claimed the surveys were fake. He threatened legal action, so I hired a lawyer. A month later Greg received official notice. Remove the fence or face court. He refused. Court happened. The judge looked at 3 independent surveys. Then looked at Greg, then ruled against him in less than 10 minutes. Greg was ordered to remove the entire fence at his expense. That alone cost him thousands. But the story gets better. While removing the fence, contractors discovered something unexpected. Part of his newly built shed was also on my property. The same shed he'd reported on social media as his ultimate backyard project. It had electrical wiring, concrete foundations, permits, everything, and nearly a quarter of it crossed onto my land. This time there was no argument. The survey evidence was overwhelming. The shed had to go. Demolition crews arrived 3 months later. I watched from my porch while workers dismantled a structure Greg had spent nearly $40,000 building. The entire process took 2 days. Greg didn't speak to anyone. He just sat inside staring through the window. After that, something amazing happened. Silence. No complaints. No reports. No midnight visits. No binoculars. No drama. 6 months later his house went up for sale. When moving trucks arrived, he never even looked in my direction. His final act was removing every single plant from his yard before leaving. Petty until the very end. The new neighbors moved in shortly afterward. They're wonderful. Last week they invited me over for a barbecue. While chatting, the husband pointed toward the property line and laughed. previous owner seemed obsessed with that fence. I smiled. You have no idea. And that's how my neighbor spent years trying to make my life miserable, only to discover he'd accidentally built half his backyard on someone else's property.